Next up, we have Bob Dunlap. Bob has been a member of the Minnesota birding community for over 25 years, and he has served in various roles in the Minnesota Ornithologists Union, including MOU president in 2018 and 2019. He currently serves on both the MOU Records Committee and the Paper Session Planning Committee, and he also produces the annual MOU Daily Birding Planner. He received the MOU's Young Birder of the Year Award in 2006. One thing you didn't put in here, Bob, which I'm going to just add, is that you are a co-creator of this fine event, the Spring Primer. Bob's day job includes working with bird data and conducting bird field work as a zoologist and data manager with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, but he still finds enjoyment in birds during his free time as well. Although he has spent countless hours over the past 2 decades exploring Minnesota's avifauna, these days you can also find him outside looking for butterflies, moths, and tiger beetles. He's also very glad to see a lot of birders and fellow nature enthusiasts who are younger than him. Thanks a lot, Bob. Here's Bob Dunlap. He is going to talk to us about Identification Challenge Potluck.
All right. Can everyone see my screen and hear me?
We can, Bob. You may want to enlarge your screen on the bottom right.
Go into presenter view.
Into presenter.
Yep, I'm going to go to presenter view.
Got it. Thank you.
Slideshow. I'm going to turn my sound on first so we can use that later. It's going to let me do that. Come on. All right. From the beginning. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that. Thanks, Susan, for that wonderful introduction. And Brandon, that was a fantastic presentation with a subject I have very little experience with. So kudos to you. We'll also need to talk about pinball at some point. I've been doing a lot of that lately too. So thanks everyone for being here this morning on this really beautiful April morning. We kind of deserve it after the last few weeks. I'm going to talk to you today about identification challenges. So what are we all have different experiences in the birding world. I'm going to make no assumptions about the audience here this morning. I think some of us may have been birding for a little longer than others, and maybe some of us are really new. But the floor is going to be open in a little bit, and I really want to hear from you all too about what challenges you have faced in terms of trying to identify the various birds we have here. So to start, I'm going to give you a couple truths about birding. First one is that birding is easy. There are birds everywhere. You don't need to travel far to find them. The farther you travel from home, the more birds you're likely to see. Second truth is the flip side of that. Birding is kind of hard. The more birds you see, the more challenging it becomes. Although some birds look unique, others really look similar to each other. And in Minnesota, we have over 300 species here that are here each year, and more that show up on occasion. You go outside of Minnesota to the entire North America, that's closer to 1,000. And then over the entire world, that's about 10,000 of birds. So that's a lot of birds to sort through. So let's talk about an approach that can help you become a better birder and address some of these challenges. Let's start by building a vocabulary of birds. Knowing the species you've seen already helps. You know when you're looking at something you haven't seen before. And this does include keeping a list. Often we talk about life lists. Some of us talk about state lists and county lists, and some of us even keep things called day lists. And this isn't limited to bird names. This is a vocabulary that includes where and when you've seen these birds. Maybe other information that will help you remind you of the bird next time you spot it. Maybe what it sounds like. Whatever kind of helps trigger your memory of what that bird could be or whether you've seen it before. The bigger this vocabulary becomes, the more you'll be prepared when you're presented with a challenge. Everyone comes across a challenge now and then, and even people who have been birding their entire lives are still facing challenges. To me, one of the most exciting things I'd have to say about birding is coming across something I haven't seen before, but that's not just a new bird species. Maybe it's a behavior that I've never noticed before. Maybe it's a sound I've never heard before. Maybe it's a weird plumage. But it really kind of is interesting to come across something that I have not experienced before. And that kind of keeps my birding fresh, and it keeps me wanting to go out more. Everyone misidentifies things, and no one is perfect. We just have to acknowledge this up front. No one's infallible. Learning how to embrace your mistakes and learn from them can be really, really difficult. But by owning your own mistakes, you not only build trust with others, but you also build trust in yourself. And that leads to the next point, is that you should be your own critic and constantly question yourself. Did you really see what you think you saw? Did you get a good enough look at it? How confident were you that you saw all the field marks to identify the bird? If it's not 100%, what else did you see that would get you to 100%? Number 5, don't compare yourself to other birders. And this is a big one. I think there's a lot of places to compare yourself to other people looking at birds. There's places where all your different lists are posted, and there's a ranking of how you're doing compared to others. If you're into that, it's totally fine. But don't make that a driving force of what you do. It's your life, and it's called a life list for a reason, because these are the things that have mattered to you, and there's a record of your life. And so, yeah, so I would kind of keep it. It's okay to participate in other things as much as you want, but also recognize that birding is also a very personal hobby. And so as long as you're getting enjoyment out of it, that's what matters. You don't need to go that far to find enjoyment. You can stay in your local patch all year round, or you can travel all across the world looking for birds. It really doesn't matter. If gulls are your jam, more power to you. The 6th point here is to be patient. You don't become an expert overnight. We wouldn't trust someone to get behind the wheel of a car without having driven a car and be a good driver. It doesn't work that way. And birding is the exact same thing. The more you do it, the better you'll become. So once you get those binoculars for the first time in your hand, start doing it. And overnight, you won't become a better birder, but the more you do it, you'll certainly get there. And number 7, this is a big one in recent years. Try birding off the grid. And I don't mean just like, not taking your smartphone with you, because obviously it's a good thing to have, and it's a safety thing too these days. But what I am saying is that as soon as you hear something you don't know, or if you see something you've never seen before, don't immediately reach for your phone and try to turn on the Merlin app. Maybe try to spend a little time with that bird. Observe it, track it down if you can't see it, see if you can find it, and see if you can see it making the vocalization that's confusing you. Take a recording with your phone, and maybe later when you're back from the field, if you've either got photos or a sound recording, then maybe look at that, analyze it closer, look at some online resources to help you get there. But really spend as much time in the field trying to look at it as possible. And then when you're on your own, back at home, trying to track it down, don't just send it to your friend who might know more than you. Use your resources, see if you can really figure out what bird it was. And just the act of you doing that personally is going to go a long ways in helping you to identify these and face these challenges. So that's kind of really my 7-point humble approach to learning birds. It's simple. Anyone can do it. It's on your own time. Don't be pressured by anyone else to change anything about this. So it's really up to you to get there. But now that we've established our approach, let's talk about the birds that challenge us. So I'm going to go through here all the photos we just saw in this presentation. They are challenging birds, or they present challenges to us in terms of identification. So I'm going to go through these, and then when I'm done, I'm going to ask the audience, whether you're at Carpenter Nature Center or online, to give me some birds. Like I said, I'm not going to make any assumptions about this group other than we all enjoy birds. So whether it's a common bird, whether it's a backyard bird, or whether it's something like a juvenile herring gull that's really hard to identify, go ahead and put it in the comments, and I'll ask Susan, we'll ask you to kind of shout those birds out to me, and then we'll go through them one by one as much as we can. So here, of course, the first image I showed, this is a drab little bird. It's got a really thin bill. It's got eye arcs. It's got yellow undertail coverts. And of course, if you know your warblers, this is an orange-crowned warbler. It's a horrible name. As you can see, it doesn't really have an orange crown. But there are other little drab birds that kind of look like it, one being the Tennessee warbler here. But as you can see, the Tennessee warbler does not have eye arcs. It has more of a black eye line. It's more of a greenish gray, kind of brighter green color all around. And it's got a white undertail here, as opposed to the yellow undertail. So that's a good challenge to point out, but we know just by looking at these features that we can identify it. This is a hawk. It's got a big, long streamlined body. It's got a long tail. The tails kind of points out towards the middle, and it's a little shorter on the ends. It's got really kind of thin streaking on the front. This, of course, is a Cooper's hawk. It's a juvenile, and it helps us identify it from this other hawk here, which is a sharp-shinned hawk, and this is a juvenile sharp-shinned hawk. Look, it's got a plumper body. It's got a smaller head relative to the body, and it's got a tail that's got feathers about all the same length. So these are things to look at that we can identify and help us identify between these two birds. All right, we got two similar looking woodpeckers here. Both of these, I reckon most people on this watching this presentation have probably seen these possibly in their backyard. The one on the left is it's got a short dainty bill, and it's also got these spots in its outer white tail feathers. And the one on the right here has a longer bill, and it's a little hard to see in this photo, but it doesn't have any of those black spots on the outer tail. And so, of course, that means the one on the left is the downy woodpecker, and the one on the right is the hairy woodpecker. All right, now if you saw a little different view of the bird on the right, it would be a lot more obvious. But here, all we can see is, for the most part, it's just two bright yellow birds. They're both about the same size. They're both warblers. They got really thin bills. The one on the left is mostly yellow overall. It's got some streaking on the front. The one on the right is also mostly yellow overall, but it's got a couple things you can look at without seeing the entire bird. So we can see the one on the right's got this black eye line. It's also got this white undertail, and the one on the left has a plain face without that eye line, and it's got a yellow undertail. That, of course, means that we're looking at a yellow warbler on the left and a blue-winged warbler on the right. Now, like I said, if you saw a different view of this warbler, the blue-winged, you would see kind of the grayish blue wings that would help identify it too. But there are a lot of other birds that are just bright and yellow, including warblers, that will come across in Minnesota. And so just looking at these finer features here will help you identify them. All right, so it kind of went from easy to not so easy to hard. And this is in the hard category. I'm not going to talk too much about flycatchers right now because I think Alex is going to talk more about them next. But they certainly present identification challenges to us. And so here we have two really brownish gray flycatchers. At first glance, they look pretty dang similar. And here, obviously, you can't see anything about behavior. You can't hear them. We're just looking at photos of them. So the one on the right, you can notice that, okay, one difference is that the mandible, which is the lower half of the bill here, it's completely dark or black on this one on the left. And on the right, you can see there's a bit of color there. There's yellow. And if you look at the one on the right, it's got a little more prominent wing bars, and the one on the left doesn't really have any obvious wing bars. That means the one on the left is an eastern phoebe, and the one on the right is an eastern wood pewee. If you could see this bird in front of you live, you would notice that the eastern phoebe tends to pump its tail a lot, and that's a good mark to identify it from a lot of other flycatchers. Eastern wood pewee generally doesn't do that. All right. So I'm going to now, again, ask everyone who's online. Not everyone has to do this, but if you feel so inclined, if you're brave enough to mention a bird that challenges you, or maybe two birds that challenge you, or maybe two birds that look like each other that challenge you, go ahead and put them in the comments. We're going to go through them here together. And I can certainly start off by going, we're going to go to Macaulay Library for this part of the presentation. It's a really good exercise. If you ever submit anything to eBird with photos, this is where your photos end up. So it really is a rich media archive now. That's been around for almost 100 years, so it's got a lot of photos, and it's only getting more photos and sound bites as you upload your checklist. But it's a really good resource for this kind of thing. So one of the challenges I wanted to start off with that I continue to struggle with, despite seeing these birds a lot, is the small white geese. So we have, here's a really good example on the left, and here's some examples with Canada geese on the right. So on the left here, we have both a snow goose and a Ross's goose right next to each other.
Hey, Bob.
Yep, go ahead.
You're just sharing your PowerPoint, not your what you're pulling up.
I'm still showing my PowerPoint. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing there.
Plus, we have a number of birds in the chat that people would like some identification. of.
Can you see the screen now?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay, yep. Here we're looking at white geese. So as I said, I've seen a lot of white geese in my life, and every year it seems like I need to relearn them. They're just a mess. And so we have Ross's geese and snow geese together on the left, and we have what looks like a blue morph Ross's goose on the right here with a Canada goose. The problem is that you don't really see them next to each other all the time. And so if you see a single bird in a field, like let's say, oh, where's a good one? How about this one? It's just by itself. You don't have anything else to compare it to. What do you look at? Well, look at the bill, first of all. It's a lot shorter, stubbier. It's a little triangle thing. It's got a little dainty bill versus a bigger bill with a grin patch on this bird. So it's here's a better example. Yep. So look at this big old grin patch on the bird on the right. That's a characteristic snow goose bill. The problem is that they also hybridize a lot, and they make all these weird forms and colors with other geese. So it's a messy complex, but it's one that I struggle with each year. And like I said, finer features need to be looked at, and in this case, it's the bill. These two birds, a small dainty bill on the left and a bigger bill on the right with a grin patch.
Bob, it's just showing the left with the Ross's goose again. So we're seeing the Ross, but not the snow goose next to it.
Oh, okay, I'm not sharing my entire screen then. Here, let's
Technology is fun, right?
There we
there
go.
you go. All right, we're good to
Perfect.
go. All right, so you should be seeing two white geese right now. The one on the left is a Ross's goose. The one on the right is a snow goose. So the bill is what to look at. The one on the right, big bill with a big grin patch. The one on the left is a dainty bill, really triangular, no grin patch. Those are the two white geese. All right, do we have a
Yes, we certainly do. We have
ahead.
a long list for you here, Bob. First
ahead.
off with purple finch versus house finch.
All right, let's purple finch and house finch. All right, so yeah, really good challenge here. Let's start with the males of the species. So here is a male purple finch on the left and a male house finch on the right. Look at how much color is on the breast and the belly here. On the purple finch, it's pretty much all that rosy purpley color all the way down to the belly. And on the house finch, you got a lot of brown streaking in there too. So the red, there's red there, but it also has a lot of brown streaking. The purple finch doesn't have that brown streaking there. Also look at the upper side. So on the purple finch on the left here, the coverts, which is all these wing feathers and back feathers here, they've got a lot of rosy color in them. Go to the house finch on the right, doesn't have that. There's some red in the kind of the back just below the head, but it really is mostly brown wings here. So if there's any kind of purplish color in the wings on the upper side, that's a purple finch. There's also some bill differences. See if I get a better shot here. Yeah, that's not a great one. Let's go to, let's try that one. It's a little more straight bill versus a little more curved bill. It's a little tricky to see sometimes, but again, look at how much rosier this bird is on the left versus how brown this one is on the right. Let's go at look at the females now. Here's a good female house finch. All right. The one thing I noticed right away is look at the face. It's got this nice white eyebrow, this nice white lower malar mark. Some people call it the mustache. House finch doesn't have that. And actually a lot of birds that are a lot of times when people confuse purple finches with other females, they're thinking of the female rose-breasted grosbeak, because it's kind of got that same pattern. Of course, the grosbeak has a much bigger bill and is a bigger bird altogether. But when you see the female house finch, it doesn't have that face pattern. Streaking's also a little different on the underside. But for the most part, it's just kind of that head pattern that helps separate them. Also, if you're lucky enough to see both males and females together, look at the males first. They'll be better giveaways than females a lot of times.
All right, Tennessee warbler versus warbling vireo.
Ooh, nice one.
Yeah, good one.
All right. So if you happen to see a breeding Tennessee warbler in the spring, a nice adult, it's not as difficult because they really have good greenish backs here and good green upper sides, kind of starkly contrasting bluish gray heads, whereas the warbling vireo doesn't really have that greenish color. I'll get a better one here. It's a much drabber bird on the right as the vireo. Also look at the bill shape and size. So on the left here, the Tennessee warbler's got that really characteristic warbler bill, really thin and pointy. The vireo's got that kind of rounder, thicker bill. Doesn't come as much to a point. It's actually a little hook at the end. Also look, the vireo doesn't have the nice greenish color as it does. They both got a little bit of a supercilium. The problem is when the Tennessee warbler comes back in the fall, it's a lot drabber looking. How about, this might be a decent one. Yep, here's a fall one. So this is the Tennessee warbler in fall plumage. It's really drabber, kind of yellowish overall. Tends to be still brighter than the vireo, but again, look at that bill. If you're thrown off by color, you got to go to something else besides plumage. You got to look at the bill or the feet, and for a lot of birds, that means the bill. So we're still looking at a really thick bill for the vireo and a really tiny bill for the warbler.
All right, how about short versus long-billed dowitchers? Yeah, exactly.
So we do have some experts in this group apparently. Let's go to short-billed dowitcher. Let's go to long-billed dowitchers. All right, so this is not one for the squeamish here. These are two shorebirds that are very, very challenging to identify together. There's field guides will mention these two birds, and oftentimes they'll disagree with each other. Sometimes new versions come out and they have to correct things that said in previous versions. There's been entire articles about these birds you can read, and still people disagree about what makes them. And that being said, because they're so tricky to tell apart, it doesn't necessarily mean the photos you're looking at on these resources are correct. So we'll hopefully try to find some that are good here. This looks like that's not a good photo. How about that one? Okay, I believe that one. All right. These look like pretty decent winter plumaged dowitchers, which is the plumage that they're probably most difficult to identify in. This is the long-billed dowitcher on the right. This is the short-billed on the left. There's not a whole lot of difference there. Long-billed tends to have a longer bill. Short-billed tends to have a slightly shorter bill. That is not a good mark, I would say, unless they're standing right next to each other, which really doesn't happen a whole lot because they don't have a lot of overlap time in Minnesota. It's not a really good mark, but there's an average difference, but that's about as good as it gets. If you can hear these birds, they do have sound differences, but it's not super diagnostic if you don't know what you're listening to. The best time to identify these is going to be in the summer. Let's see if we can find some nice breeding plumage ones. Here's probably a good enough one. It's Ontario. I'm going to limit it to Minnesota. And let's go location, Minnesota. Okay, here's some photos from Minnesota of short-billed dowitchers. That's going to be fall, it looks like. Let's go. Yeah, let's go fall there. And then we're going to filter the same thing. Going to go Minnesota. Show results, and we're going to look for some. Okay, how about, here's some fall plumage ones. All right, so we've got a juvenile short-billed on the left, and we got, looks like a juvenile long-billed on the right. It's hard to see in these photos. These are kind of plain, these are called tertials here. Their wing feathers closest to the body, and they look markedly different between the two. But again, unless you have a scope, you're probably not going to be able to see this. That's about the only way to tell apart in the fall, unfortunately. We'll get some breeding plumage here, maybe. They both, in the breeding plumage, look kind of reddish, brick colored. Kind of like this bird. It got kind of this golden overall color. Long-billed also looks really similar to that. maybe a little more brick red, got kind of these white outline feathers here versus more golden outline. But these are really, really difficult birds to identify. So what I'm mentioning here are just, in passing things you could look for, but it's not going to make sense until you're actually looking at these things in the field. And I should say too, you can look at these things as much as you want online, or you can look at as many photos in a field guide or drawings. It's never going to kick in until you have experience with it in the field. And that goes for a lot of birds too. Some birds are just really inherently hard to identify. You'll be standing next to someone and they'll say the opposite bird to what you say. Sometimes the experts disagree. So like I said, there are some birds that just really are difficult to identify inherently.
So Bob, Andy Forbes points out a quote by Bob Russell, and I'm wondering if you agree or disagree. If you're wearing a jacket, it's a long-billed dowager. If you're wearing a t-shirt, it's a short-billed. True or false?
Yeah, was that Bob Russell? I thought that was Bob Jansen who said that.
I don't know.
Either way, they're
It's a
both great
Bob.
birders.
Bob
Yeah.
Russell probably stole it.
Yes, that sounds like Russell. Yeah, so if you're wearing shorts, it could be a short-billed dowager, and if you're wearing pants, it could be a long-billed. In general, yes, but generalities aren't going to tell you 100% what you're looking at. So yeah, short-billed dowager tends to come through a little later in the spring and a little earlier in the fall, and later in the fall for short-billed. I'm sorry, or later in the spring for short-billed, earlier in the fall for short-billed, earlier in the year, earlier in the spring for long-billed when it's colder, later in the fall for long-billed when it's colder. Warmer weather tends to be better for short-billed in Minnesota. Cooler weather is for long-billed, but yeah, not 100% across the board. Use that with caution.
All right. We have a long list here, but we're running out of time, so I'm only going to ask you for two more.
Sounds good.
First is northern versus loggerhead shrike.
Loggerhead shrike. Northern shrike. All right. So that is a good pivot from the dowager, because generally if you're wearing shorts and look at it as shrike, it's almost guaranteed to be a loggerhead. Northerns don't hang around long, and there's a few probably in northern Minnesota, maybe a couple in southern Minnesota yet. By mid-April, they're pretty much gone from the state. And that's about when the loggerheads start to appear. There's a little bit of overlap in late March. Maybe in the fall there's a little overlap, but generally if you're wearing anything that's covering your body in good amounts, whether it's a coat or pants or generally a winter jacket, you're probably looking at a northern shrike without any problems. The opposite is true for loggerhead. They breed here. They're going to be found in the middle of summer. So just by time of year, that's a good indicator. But if you happen to see one in like late March or maybe early April, then it's a little trickier. So the one thing to notice is how thick the mask is. This black is going way above the eye and encompasses the entire eye in the loggerhead. In the northern, it's got a much thinner mask, and you can actually see the eye poking out above that mask. That's a really good indicator. The bill shape's a little longer on the northern, a little shorter on the loggerhead. That's not easy to see. Another good mark is if you can see the underside, and I'll try to find a good photo of that here. Let's see. How about this one might have it? No, let's try this one. I'm looking for a photo that shows a close-up northern shrike really well in good light. This one's decent. All right, so we got the northern shrike on the right. Again, it's got that thinner mask. You can see the eye poking out. You can see a little bit of barring here on the front. So this is its breast and its belly. It's got those really thin bars. Logger shrike is just plain kind of grayish white. It doesn't have those bars. So if you can see that, that's a really good mark too.
Excellent. How about song versus Lincoln sparrow?
Oh, I was hoping someone would bring those up. Lincoln sparrow is actually one of my favorite birds. They're not really super colorful, but something about them is really nice. They look sharp. They breed in bogs in northern Minnesota, which is a really fun habitat to be walking around in. But right about now, song sparrows are definitely coming back. Lincoln sparrows probably not quite back yet. They'll show up in another few weeks. I'll get a little better song sparrow here. Ooh, here's a really good song sparrow. So these are really closely tricky to, it's a tricky appearance between the two of them. They look really similar a lot of times. Sometimes you get song sparrows that look a little more boldly marked, but these two species, I'm just looking at them right now, and just by a quick glance shows me, oh, that must be the same bird. But they're not. The one on the left is the song sparrow. The one on the right is the Lincoln sparrow. Lincoln sparrow has a little more gray in the face overall, and it's got kind of a contrasty, this is a buffy tan malar area, or again, that mustache area. And then the front of it too has got more of that buffy color. It's got little finer streaks, and sometimes they have a more of a bold central breast spot, and sometimes they don't. The song sparrow generally has more bold marking in front, and we'll get another one where it's facing us. Here's a classic song sparrow here. It's got that really big blotch in the middle, generally has heavier streaking on the sides. Face tends to be a little browner overall, kind of like this one, whereas the Lincoln's, again, is more of a gray. The eye ring stands out a little bit more on the Lincoln sparrow to me a lot of times, where it doesn't stand out as much on the song sparrow. But they are really tricky to identify sometimes. And again, if you're here in summer in southern Minnesota, it's got to be a song sparrow. We don't have Lincoln sparrows here. If you're in northern Minnesota, unless you're in a bog in summer, you're probably looking at a song sparrow. But yeah, a great challenge.
Perfect. Bob, we have run out of time, even though there are other comparisons in the chat. And if you have time at some point, you may want to put a few pointers in the chat.
Right, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I was hoping we get to the blackbirds like Brewers, but that ain't going to be happening.
Another time.
Another time. So thank you so much. Truly appreciate it. Great as always.